attracted you originally to come to Central Otago and make Pinot in the late 90s or mid 90s actually?
I'd studied at Lincoln University in Canterbury, and in the late 80s, and I finished in 1990, and at that time the first wine from Central Otago had only just come out. It was a 1987 vintage, and there was very tiny quantities, and there really wasn't much about. I'd heard of it and only tasted a couple of wines, but there seemed to be something about the early wines that I did taste that it was a lot of potential. There was a real sparkle in the wines, and in particular the early wines from Ripon, 1991-92, were Pinot Noirs that I thought were of incredible quality and had an enormous potential. So those were instrumental wines for me.
Excellent. And what is the affinity that Central Otago has with Pinot Noir? Why is it a great Pinot land?
I think for Pinot Noir, you really need to have a cool climate for it to excel, and we definitely have that here in Central Otago. But the problem with a lot of cool climates, when you go to find them, they can tend to start to become wet climates, and particularly in the autumn, when you're waiting for that last degree of ripeness to occur. And in Central Otago, we're the driest part of New Zealand, with only 350 millimeters of rain annually. And when we do get rain, it's always associated with wind. Being a small island in the middle of the Southern Ocean, it's always very windy here. So our threat of disease is extremely low. So we have very, very clean fruit and ripens in a cool climate. Even after a cool summer, we can still harvest perfectly ripe fruit. We just wait a little bit longer, and we'll eventually get the ripeness.
Excellent. And how would you characterize Pinot from Central Otago, kind of thinking about the other Pinot regions in the world? You've worked in many other regions as well, so how would you characterize it in the glass?
Our Pinot is, they are influenced definitely by the young vines at the moment. The oldest vines in the region are hardly any older than 25 years old, and so that is a component that we're sort of working through, and we're starting to see much greater improvements from the older vines. They tend to be quite fruity, but again, as the vines are aging, the fruit is being a little bit more suppressed, and we're starting to see more complexities coming through. There's always a good acidity from the cool climate, the cool nighttime temperatures that we have, and the dark cherry, the black fruit spectrum is quite common. Sort of warmer vintages, we tend to get more sort of a red fruit spectrum, and I think the fruit tannin is relatively moderate, so the wines have a suppleness and an elegance to them.
Excellent. And your Felton Road is very well known for kind of putting Bannockburn in particular on the map. Can you explain to us what is Bannockburn and how is it different? What differentiates it from the rest of Central Otago, and leading up to becoming its own GI in the future as well? What makes it special or unique?
So in Central Otago, we have 7 subregions that make up the greater Central Otago region, and it's quite a large area. We have a series of valleys and basins, and for example, from Bannockburn to the Wanaka area, you have to travel 55 kilometers, but over a 2,000 meter mountain range. Our elevations are around 200 to 300 meters here. So the subregions are really quite distinct, and I think it's important in the future that we identify those subregions and get them labeled and mapped and GIs applied for to give us that protection. The difference between them, you are going to get different climatic effects in these different basins. The soils, while different, we also have to say that we've got a lot of variation within the subregions as well. So you can't just sort of say a generalization about the soils.
And you said at Felton Road, how many soil types do you have within what space?
Along the length of Felton Road is only 3 kilometres, and we have up to 10 different soil types. From pure clay to pure sand, to alluvial gravels, rounded pebbles, to angular schist gravel, heavy silts. So the soils can be very, very diverse and very complex.
Excellent. And you're a biodynamic producer as well. Can you tell us about what is the opportunity for producing organic and biodynamic wines here, and why is the climate quite nicely suitable for that?
We produce, well, have done since 2002. Our vineyards under organics and biodynamics, and with the dry climate, the low rainfall, it's very conducive. We have very, very low disease pressure. So it just makes sense to farm organically and biodynamically.
Do you see a trend in New Zealand going towards that direction?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, an informal survey that we did in central Otago, we found that just on 25% of the vineyards here are now being farmed organically or biodynamically, and that's pretty significant for a wine region to have that higher percentage. I think overall nationally in New Zealand it's around 7%. And every year there's more and more vineyards converting. When they see the benefits from the producers that have been doing it for some time.
Excellent, fabulous. Thank you. We'll get out of the wind.